Welcome to the next installment in the Options Greeks tutorial series. Today we are going to discuss Vega. Now Vega is the measure of the change in the option price based on the 1% change in the underlying's implied volatility. What is implied volatility? It's the volatility we are expecting in the future, all right? Now, does it have to be correlated to the historical volatility? Not really. And you see an example of that in many FOMC meetings. You would see price chopping around for a long time. You would see the historical or the realized volatility is low, but we know FOMC can induce major chaos in the markets and the implied volatility will be high. All right. So there's no direct correlation because what happened in the past does not really predict what's happening in the future. And there's no direct way to calculate it either. We have to gauge implied volatility based on the options prices in the market. That's how it's done. Now, Vega, the impact of implied volatility is always positive. The higher the IV, I'm going to start calling it IV. I don't want to say implied volatility every time. The higher the IV, the higher the option price. So Vega is always positive. Now let's see how Vega is affected by in the money options, far out the money options, and at the money options. We know that IV will have the maximum impact for at the money options. Right? That's where it will lead to maximum change in price. If something is far out the money or far in the money, that option has already chosen its direction. It's already chosen its destiny. A high IV is not going to affect it as much as it would do it at the money. So Vega is highest for at the money options, and it tends to drop down and heads to zero as we go far in the money and far out the money. How does it work with volatility? If the actual volatility is high in the markets, it's very hard to define what at the money options are, because price can move widely. So your at the money definition is not as rigid, which is why the Vega curve that we saw in the last slide will be a bit flatter. It will be a bit wider. It will have to account for a lot more strike prices. As the volatility decreases, the realized one, Vega will have more of a curve with a sharp bulge in the middle. And so it will be less flat overall. That's about it. How does it work with days to expiration? If you guys remember, we had Gamma also with a similar curve, but as we got closer and closer to expiration, the Gamma at the money options had a bigger impact. It was higher. Vega is the exact opposite. The closer we get to expiration, the impact of implied volatility dies down because we don't expect much future volatility. There's not many days left for it, right? So over time, Vega curve will die out. And the farther we are from the strike price, the farther we are from at the money options, the faster it will die down. Because if the time to expiration is going lower, then far in the money and out the money options do not really care what the implied volatility is. They have already chosen their destiny. At the money options too. So the ones that are farther out, the strikes, those options will lose Vega the fastest compared to at the money options. That's about it for Vega, right? It does not really affect our decision making day to day too much. Just know that options are going to be more expensive as we have earnings or major volatility events like FOMC or CPI, and just account for that. If the IV is too high, where you do not expect that the market can make such a move on earnings, do not try and play those earnings, because what's likely going to happen is that the earnings come out a lot more normal than the insanity market is expecting. The implied volatility is going to drop very fast and your option value will get crushed. That's called the volatility crush, vol crush. So if the IV of an earnings option play is too high, do not play it. But other than that, you don't really need to think too much about Vega. That's about it for this tutorial. And that also finishes our Options Greeks tutorial series. I'm not going to discuss Rho, which is the rate of change of option price based on interest rates. Since we don't really indulge in options that are too far out, maybe years out, we don't really need to worry about that Greek overall. All right, that's it. If you have any questions, ask me in the chats.